Hello and welcome back to Lane 4 Podcast. Today we're here with Andrew Horsfall Turner, who is an triathlete and Welsh record holder in the Ironman distance. Before we dive into today's podcast, we'd like to say a massive thank you to TryHard, our sponsors for today's podcast. TryHard are an amazing swim care brand that makes products such as shampoo, conditioners, and many more. Check out TryHard in our Instagram bio at Lane 4 Podcast and use our discount code Lane 4 Podcasts, all caps, for 20% off. So, Andrew, how do you balance your training between cycling, swimming, and running? Because obviously we're all swimmers, and it's very just obviously swimming and a bit of gym. How do you balance all three?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting complex, and it's one that I don't think kind of two athletes would do the same. I obviously came from a swimming background like yourself, so I was very used to the kind of regimented structure of how like some programs are built. You kind of Monday to Saturday doing doubles and maybe doing between 9 and 11 kind of sessions. Whereas triathlon is a completely different minefield. And I guess personally for me, I kind of swim 5 to 6 times a week. I run 5 to 6 times a week, and I probably ride my bike about 4 times a week. But the balance of how we kind of put those together is pretty fluid, and it changes week to week depending on like where I am in the season and when my next like iron distance race is coming up. Which I work with a coach, and he kind of he's the brains behind doing all of that kind of job. But it fluctuates massively, and I guess the biggest difference I'd say from moving from swimming into triathlon is that a training session doesn't have to be 2 hours long. Sometimes I'll do a 30-minute easy run, and that's a training session. But then on the next day I might have a 7-hour like bike ride. And that's one session. So I guess it's always changing,
Massively,
and
varies.
yeah.
Sounds like that's so
Massively.
Because would you say swimming is your strongest part of the triathlon?
Yeah, so in 2022 I was the like pro tri #1 ranked swimmer, which is like we've got this like organization that kind of ranks us based on like different algorithms and stuff. And I managed to be ranked #1 in the swim, which was nice. But yeah, I've kind of naturally then picked up cycling, and that's become like a really big passion of mine. And I'd say that's probably my second strongest. And then running, I don't know if you have much experience with, but for a swimmer, running is pretty brutal because we spent so many years in the pool that our hips, knees, and ankles just aren't ready for the impound of the concrete.
No, not at all. I think swimmers are probably the worst runners in the world. Like watching all of us try and run at the start of the season is horrendous, but it is, yeah. So, you're coaching now. Do you only coach athletes, or are
Yes.
you, triathletes, or are you just swimming, or is it just triathletes in general?
So I actually, sorry, excuse me.
No,
I
don't worry.
guess to tell that story fully, I probably have to like roll back to when I finished swimming myself.
Yeah, please do.
So I finished swimming back in 20, can't even remember now, back in 2014, 2015, somewhere around there.
Okay.
I swam at university in Swansea. Again, I was like, nothing kind of special as a swimmer. I was, raced at sort of national level in the pool. And I was fortunate enough to do some like great swim, kind of mile elite open water sort of stuff, but nothing like serious, and nothing kind of like international level. So when I quit swimming, I kind of a bit like a lot of swimmers do. Like swimming is your passion, and it's something you've done for at that point I'd been doing it for 15 plus years already. So to walk away from swimming was a really difficult thing,
Mm.
and that actually then led me to actually being invited to help coach. So I finished my swimming. I was going to carry on living in Swansea. I was originally from England. And yeah, I got invited to come and help coach as a bit of a part-time job. So those who know Swansea, you got kind of Adam Baker, who's the Swim Wales kind of head coach, and then you've got Haley Baker, who's the university coach. And Adam and Haley both used to coach me at different points. And Haley actually invited me poolside when she was working with the aquatics club, and that's how I got into coaching. So spent a few years doing that, and I coached in Cardiff for a bit. And then as I got into triathlon in 2018, that's when I started doing a bit of kind of remote online coaching with triathlon as well. And I guess it's been a kind of, again, very like a natural progression. The more triathlon I've done and the better I've got as a professional, I've had to kind of scale back the amount I coach,
Yeah.
because as you're aware, there's only so many hours in a week. And when you're training, like I probably train on a big week now, like 30 plus hours. To try and do that, I've got a young baby as well, to have a family, and then to try and coach on poolside 20 hours a week, it's not possible.
Yeah.
So at the moment I'm doing very little swim coaching, doing quite a lot of online coaching, but coaching is one of those things that, I can't be an athlete forever. And triathlon is a great sport, and you can keep going till maybe 40, 42, 43. Some of the oldest kind of Ironman athletes are. But it's not something that will last forever. And I definitely see myself in the future possibly being, full-time back on poolside. But yeah, we will have to see what happens there.
Yeah. So you mentioned you just had a baby. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much.
So, how are you balancing now having a child, being a parent, and still doing the training? And will you still be competing this year, or are you taking a little break?
Yeah, no, so yeah, continue to compete. So oh, sorry about
No, don't worry.
that. I'm on my wife's laptop and her
No,
FaceTime's
don't
gone
worry.
off. Yes, I will continue to compete this season. I'm quite fortunate. So like coaching isn't my only kind of job. So part of being a professional triathlete is we kind of work with certain brands. So for example, one of my biggest sponsors is a company called Blue 70, which also is in the swim
Yeah,
world.
wetsuits.
Wetsuits, and they also do some tech suits. Back in 2009, they were kind of really renowned for their one of their super suits, one of the rubber ones. So yeah, I'm lucky that I work with companies such as like Blue 70, who support me financially as well as with equipment. So it does enable me to, you know, in a simple form, put food on the table.
Yeah.
In terms of the balancing of actually having a child and training, um, you've got to have a very supporting wife. Let's just say that,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of hours. There's a lot of hours where you've got to be a bit selfish and do the training. So I try and give back as much as possible when I can.
Yeah. Because there's obviously, there's so many hours that go into, especially Ironman, like triathlons. There's so much to do and all of that. So what
Yes, yeah,
inspired you to become a triathlete, especially doing the Ironman distance?
yeah. So I guess swimming was, for me, the only sport that I had like a real passion for. I guess growing up, and that's how I ended up being like, say, a full-time swimmer, but like swimming being like my main sport through like kind of school and university. And I guess when I was coming to the end of my swimming career, I'd kind of got to a point where I was very realistic that I was never going to get to the level of like international, world championship, European championship, Olympics even. Um, and it's kind of a bit, I don't know how what the term, you probably say it's a bit kind of a bit gutting being an athlete and putting so many years into something and kind of not really reaching the level you wanted to get to. And I kind
Yeah.
of felt that, I'd kind of given up on sport. So when I kind of finished swimming, I kind of got this kind of resentment of, I put so much years into something and I didn't really get much out of it.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely fine, because when I went into coaching, I completely relit my love with swimming, but from a completely different perspective. But then triathlon kind of came through as a bit of a mistake in a way. I kept really fit when I started coaching because I just didn't want to be that swimmer who quits swimming, eats way too much, puts on loads of weight, and is really unfit. So I kept fit, and I then actually just sort of stumbled upon on YouTube the Ironman World Championships. And for those that don't know, like what the Ironman World Championships is, it's a race that happens every year. It's a bit more confusing now, but the simple form is that once a year in October, the best Ironman triathletes in the world go to Hawaii and they race on the Big Island in a place called Kona.
Yeah.
And it's a spectacle because you're like competing in this crystal clear blue water. You're cycling 112 miles through like a lava field, like obviously not live,
Yeah.
extinct, but like this big lava field, and then you're running a marathon in like 30 plus degrees. And I watched this video on YouTube of this guy called Lionel Sanders, who's a Canadian guy, and he's quite a muscular person, and those that obviously can't see me because we're on a podcast, but I was quite a built lad. I was never like the skinny kind of guy. I was quite muscular, and I didn't like necessarily do loads of like weight training. It was just very natural. So when I saw that this guy was, he finished second that year, and he was kind of lit a bit of a light bulb in my head where I was like, oh, okay, you haven't got to be like super skinny to be a triathlete and to,
Yeah.
to compete in events. And it kind of favors the strong. So that lit my passion in the end of 2017. I saw that, and it was more of a kind of like, I don't feel like I'm done with sport, and I feel like potentially this was an avenue that I could see success in the future. So I kind of threw myself into it, and yeah, a bit like with a lot of people find with swimming, once you see progression, once you kind of get your teeth into training and stuff, yeah, you can get obsessed, but in hopefully in a healthy way.
Yeah. The progression in swimming and, when you're improving in sport is such an addictive thing. Like, it's just a feeling you get from nothing else. So linking back to, the world championships and all of that. So how did you, obviously mentally, that must be very difficult competing in something like that. How did you like personally mentally prepare for that? Like, what would you say is the most challenging part of the triathlon for you?
So just in general, it's not even the world championships, but just to compete in an Ironman, because I guess a lot of people, like, you haven't got to be necessarily like a big long-term athlete to race an Ironman, and you don't necessarily have to do it professionally. But the people who do race it professionally, and the guys and people that I race against, it basically requires you to roughly swim for 3.8K, which takes 45 to 50 minutes, depending on currents. You then ride your bike between 4 to 4.5 hours, which is 112 miles. And then you have to run a marathon, which is, if you're a good runner, is just under 3 hours. So the requirement from me, who was I was a pool swimmer and an open water swimmer, but I used to race like 1500 in the pool. 1500 is over in, well, for me, it was 16 minutes something. So to move from 16 minutes up to 8 hours of racing,
Yeah.
it was just a big mindset shift. And actually so I think the biggest challenge is actually just being able to continue to move and to push yourself for that long, because there's a lot of like physical fatigue, but also like mental fatigue. Because, and you probably find this like if you think like even back to like a swim session where you've done 8K, 9K, even like a 10K swim session, like swimming itself isn't like necessarily the hard thing. It's just like once you get to like 8 and 9K and you've been doing it for so long, like your brain starts to like tell you to like, nah, don't do anymore, get out now, kind of thing. And you start getting those thoughts maybe 4 hours into an 8 hour race, and you've got to kind of fight that.
Yeah.
So the training I do is very much physical, but I think there's a massive psychological element to it as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear that?
It no, it's fine. Don't worry.
Okay, we're good.
It's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I can. Yeah, it's very understandable how like that. It's very similar in a swimming session because I'm a distance swimmer and open water swimmer as well, and I think it's just very just you get to that point where your body just wants to stop now, and it's very you just got to push through it, especially in an open water event when you're doing 10Ks and that kind of thing, and it just really gets into your head where it's like you just want to get out of the point.
Yeah.
So, can you share any tips for beginners who want to get into triathlons? Because I think it's very interesting what you said about not to be a triathlete, you don't have to be skinny because everyone sees these triathletes and they're all normally very skinny, like marathon runners, which is the sort of vibe you get. But obviously, you don't have
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
like that. So,
definitely.
what tips would you give to a beginner?
I guess it depends on what walk of life you're coming from. Like let's obviously being a predominantly swimming podcast, I think the biggest thing for me is if you were a swimmer, instantly you've got a massive advantage because a lot of people struggle with the swim itself to like just even swim 3.8 kilometers if you're like a complete non-swimmer, and then you've got to swim 3.8K open water. Like that's a daunting thing, like really daunting. So from a swimmer's perspective, the biggest tip I would almost give them is that once, because everyone kind of will have it at some point, like once they feel like their swimming career is over, be it by choice or by injury or whatever it is, but you still have a passion for kind of sport, is that you instantly have a great platform to do Ironman. So it's not necessarily like the end of your sporting road if you stop swimming.
Yeah,
So that's probably one tip I'd probably give to swimmers is like swimming is, and it was, the most important thing to me when I was younger. But just because you finish swimming doesn't mean you can continue as an athlete past that.
yeah,
Um, for those that excuse me, for those that come into the sport from, I'd say like more of a non-swimming background. So you get a lot of people who used to play like rugby or football or some even that were just completely inactive through like university. Um, what I would say to those guys and girls is that you need to basically nail the fundamentals. It's very like I think a lot of triathletes get into the habit and kind of I guess it's like sexy to go and ride your bike for like 5 hours, and you probably heard of an app called Strava
yeah,
where all your friends can kind of see your activity, and you go ride your bike for 5 hours and it looks really cool and like, oh wow, you rode all the way to XYZ kind of thing. But if you're completely brand new to triathlon and you haven't got a swimming background, the best thing for you to do is just to get into the pool, get a swimming coach or a triathlon coach to look at your technique, and just to try and master that as quick as you can. Because if you master your technique in the pool when you're getting into the sport, then you're setting yourself up in long term for a really like good progression. Because if I chucked a bike at you, for example, you've never done a triathlon, but if I chucked a bike at you and gave you a pair of running trainers, you could pick them up quite easily, and it wouldn't
yeah,
take you. I reckon if I'd say this to most swimmers, I reckon if I gave them a bike and a pair of trainers, you could probably do an Ironman in a few weeks. It would be very painful and
yeah,
you'd go really slowly, but you could do it because of
yeah,
fitness. But if you gave the same equipment to a non-swimmer, they're not just going to be able to jump in the sea and swim 3.8 kilometers. Like it's just a complete barrier. So I think, yeah, for me, it's definitely just getting in the pool, getting some advice on technique, building up your endurance in the water, and almost thinking of the bike run as a secondary to once
yeah.
you've mastered that first discipline, then developing those other skills.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think there's a very different thing to swim fit and normal fitness. I think lots of people are very fit and then they try swimming and then it's a completely different type of fitness. So I know a
Yeah,
lot
for
of people
sure.
that got into a swimming pool and they're absolutely hopeless, but normally are massively fit people. I think in a triathlon, obviously people as a swimmer, I think you're right. You could give it a hit at the other things, but if you can't swim to a pretty decent level, I think it'd be very difficult. I think, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. So have you ever experienced any funny, memorable moments during a race? Anything gone wrong for you? Has anything gone wrong for other people you've seen, which is just giving you giggles basically mid through the race?
Oh, that's a good. I guess like for most things that happen in races, like at the time, they're
Yeah,
probably more like frustrating than funny, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
Especially if they
And
happen
then
to you.
afterwards,
Um,
it's probably more funny.
yeah, like hindsight, like I'd probably say that one of my kind of like most frustrating, but also like now I look at it like kind of like the funniest thing that happened to me in the race I did last year. I raced in a race in Switzerland, Ironman Switzerland, and I was in the lead group on the bike. So I say group, there's like three or four of us, and it's a non-drafting bike, but you're kind of riding with a 12-meter
Together.
gap together. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. Um, and the way this course worked in Switzerland is you basically rode up pretty much a mountain and then back down to the lake, and you did that twice. And I was I was about to get to the top of the mountain on the second loop, and I probably had about 10 meters to go. And then it's literally like you didn't even have to pedal almost. You just roll down the hill back to where the transition was for the run. And I literally went to like push that last little bit to get over the top of the mountain. And I literally hear like a ping. And I look down and my chain on my bike has just snapped, just
Oh,
completely snapped.
yeah,
And it like unraveled and just hit the floor. And I'm literally like, and I think it's funny now because like at the time I was like so stunned and so shocked and like,
yeah,
what am I meant to do? Like, what am I meant to do? Um, and like actually speaking to like people afterwards, they're like, oh, you didn't carry a spare link because like bike chains have these like little links that you can
yeah.
like add to them to put them back together. And I was like, no, because I hadn't even thought of that. And I still consider myself quite new to the whole triathlon thing, like only starting in 2018. And I'm not like a genius with like bike tech and stuff like that yet.
Mhm.
Um, so like now in hindsight, it's like, well, if I carried a spare link, I could have just literally put the chain back together and carried on, and it would be no drama. But because I didn't have a spare link, I had to stand at the side of the road for 25 minutes trying to speak to this Swiss guy. And Swiss in Switzerland, they speak French, German. I think they speak Italian as well. I think they obviously like have a
Yeah,
big mix of
yeah,
languages. So I don't even know what language I was trying to speak to this guy in. But I was trying to explain to him what I needed, and we just like the language barrier just makes like at the time I was so frustrated because I couldn't communicate properly with him.
yeah.
But like looking back on that, it was just hilarious because he was literally like putting his hands up in the air, be like,
Not a clue.
I don't know what you're talking about, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, it's nice to look back on things like that, though. So,
Yeah, and it's sorry, Gary.
yeah, yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying like there's loads of like I guess there's loads of things that can happen at a triathlon as well. And they always say that like the swim is pretty straightforward. But the bike element, there's like
Yeah,
so many different things on a bike that can go wrong, like punches, dropping like your bottles of like nutrition, and
yeah.
you almost want to get to the end of the bike because as soon as you get to the end of the bike and put your running shoes on, there's not that much that can go wrong.
Less factors.
Well, out of, within your hands, yeah, it's everything's
Yeah,
within your hand, like within your control as soon as you get onto the run, kind of thing.
yeah. So you mentioned nutrition there. So how do you manage nutrition and hydration? Because I don't think most people know how to do it at all. But obviously, in an Ironman, it's huge because you're working for that long at such a high intensity.
Yeah, so and again, this is like probably one of the biggest things I've developed from when I was a swimmer, because I don't know how you guys find like your day-to-day training, but most swimmers tend to just put water in the drinks bottle. So
Yeah,
like
exactly.
they'll just go for like a 2 hour training session. It would just be like, one bottle with like just water in. And the more I've kind of got into triathlon and understood that, like, especially I've got to go for 8 hours, is that you deplete yourself so badly, so quickly in terms of like carbohydrates in your blood, in your like the glycogen in your muscles, that sort of thing. Um, so I'm fortunate that I partnered with a company called Infinite Nutrition Europe. So company that's based out of Czech Republic. Um, and they supply me with kind of custom blends of drinks and stuff like that I need. So I will basically try and drink in an Ironman somewhere between say 95 to 120 grams of carbohydrates an hour. Um,
Okay.
which is a lot basically.
Yeah,
It's,
it is.
I always use the it's obviously not the same kind of sugar, but it's the equivalent amount of sugar of basically having like a bag and a half of Haribo, like the big bags of Haribo. It's like a bag and
Yeah,
a half of Haribo an hour for 8 hours, which
which
is
is
like
mental to be fair.
crazy if you think of it. Yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
amount of sugar. Um, but you really like you need it. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I think as a swimmer I did badly was like underfueled. Like
mm,
not in terms of eating, like as a swimmer, every swimmer can eat. Like between sessions, like we have the appetites of kings. But in the actual sessions themselves, the more carbohydrates I take in like a training session, the better the performance of the training session is, and therefore the better adaptation you're going to get and progression you'll see. So
yeah,
that's actually something that I've spoken to. So I coach, as I said earlier, I coach a little bit with Swansea University, and that's actually a conversation that we've had with some of the swimmers, and it's something that I've almost taken from my experience in triathlon and being able to reapply it to the swimming world as well, which has been quite nice.
yeah,
And then hydration's a minefield because it's so dependent on, for me anyway, like where I'm racing. So like if I'm racing in a hot place, to say I'm gonna race in Texas in April, and it could be like just under 30 degrees and like really humid, and I'll probably be sweating 2 liters an hour of like liquid. So
yeah,
the thought of trying to drink like, I don't know, like two and a half of
yeah.
them an hour is like crazy.
Quite
And so
scary.
it's almost impossible as well. So like you almost have to be prepared to be slightly dehydrated, which is a scary thing as well. But yeah, so that hydration is very crucial. But for me, it's the fueling. The carbohydrates are like carbs are king. The more sugar you have the more sugar availability you have, the better you perform.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how you like bring that into swimming as well, because I agree that that kind of thing isn't stressed enough in swimming. Even hydration, like I think because everyone like I feel it as well. When you're in a pool, you don't feel the need to drink water. Like there's nothing in your head where you're like, oh, I want to drink something. Because it's just not
But
like
you're
you
actually
don't you
sweating loads. Yeah.
exactly you don't feel like you're sweating or anything. So you end up really not drinking enough. But I think that's something that I think really needs to be pushed more and probably everyone needs to work on a bit. So finally, what is your favorite part about being a triathlete, like a triathlete? Is it like the social side of it? Is it the benefit from the training? Yeah,
It's
it's a difficult
probably
one.
it's probably everything together. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably the whole thing. Like I don't know. Um, it's probably applicable to like a lot of people who are swimmers, but I kind of like the lifestyle. I like I like feeling fit and healthy. I like the feeling of pursuing goals and feeling driven. Like when I wake up in the morning, I like the driven feeling of I'm training because I'm racing Ironman Texas in April. You know, it's easy then to get out of bed and kind of feel motivated for the day. Um, but I love pushing myself in training. I love working hard. I was always kind of known as a bit of a workhorse. Um, I love going for like long rides with like other people and socializing. And it's kind of weird because like it's difficult to kind of get that social element in, say, like swimming in the pool, but like swimming is so social, like before, afterwards, etc. Like,
yeah,
and I think I can kind of get that now with in my sessions sometimes. Like, I don't train with people like every day, but when I do go out for a ride with other people, I do love that kind of like socializing too. So I'd probably give you a bit of a on the fence kind of answer to that question, but I'd basically just, yeah, the lifestyle. I just love the athlete
yeah,
lifestyle, and I don't I'm not a type of person who could do a 9 to 5 job, and I'm one of
yeah.
those people that
Sit
just
at a
needs to be
desk.
moving. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, agreed.
that's not me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. This has been incredible. It's really interesting to see, a different sport and see how it connects to swimming. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having
So
me.
yeah, thank you. So if anyone would like to check out any more Lane 4 podcasts, go to @Lane 4 Podcast. And as we said at the start, go to our bio and go check out Try Hard and use our discount code Lane4Podcast. Thank you.